So they say keep your physical distance. They say that you do not touch surfaces. They say that you shall be able to access this and such a place. But all these conversations, they never come down and say, so for the persons with disabilities, this is what exactly we have in place so that we can make it easier for them to do that. Let's talk to a disability rights activist now, Wanja Maina, and she is with us in the studio. Thank you very much for joining us, Wanja.
Asante sana.
Welcome to the Situation Room. That's the hot seat.
Aha.
But
Feels hot.
Really already?
Well, because the person who was sitting here a few minutes ago left it hot.
all right.
Voila.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Wanja, you're a blogger and a rights activist.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good morning, Kenya. I would say I'm a blogger because I write bits and pieces. I would say I'm a disability rights activist because I have a disability. And over time, I've carved a niche and created a voice for myself and for my peers. Yeah.
By doing what?
The usual...
What does this voice say?
The voice is saying that there's no one who is voiceless. The voice is saying that we are tired of this narrative where people are told you are voiceless. We are speaking on behalf. So the voice is just saying we are here. We want to be in public spaces. We want to have a very balanced narrative on media. Speaking of a balanced narrative on media, I've been seeing some sort of stories where when people are talking about COVID and people with disabilities, it's from a very charitable case where politicians
almost condescending,
Sympathetic.
politicians taking maize flowers and taking photos with people. And for some of us, we feel strongly that it will be better if we have some of our members in the county COVID committees where people are making decisions, where people are talking about distribution of resources and PPEs. So those are some of our politics.
You've dived right into it. So actually, let's just go there. So we have all these committees. We have the National Emergency Response Committee. We've got the COVID-19 Task Force. We've got at the county level, we have all these committees that are dealing with COVID. In how many of those committees are persons with disabilities directly represented?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I'd be lying if I know of the number, but at the Community Health Committee here in the Ministry of Health, I am a member, but it was not out of the initiative of the ministry. It was actually on my personal initiative to go and look for them and say, here are some of our issues. And as this COVID-19 is evolving, no one understands it very well. This is the time people are trying to put a finger on it. I would want to believe that not many people are in those committees, but I don't have the figure at the top of my head. But certainly we can see that even the fact that counties were ill-prepared from the beginning, and even the fact that people on the ground are talking about being left behind, certainly the number is underwhelming.
If I may take the discussion perhaps further back and talk about representation at the political front. At the level of MCAs, do you have numbers of people with disabilities who actually have seats as MCAs? Or let's go to Parliament and even let's go to Senate.
So that's a very good question. And I think whenever we are talking about this discussion, I feel like political representation and political goodwill is the beginning of the conversation, because that's where people who decide where the money goes sit. It is sad to note that in 2017, the number of county assemblies with people with disabilities is actually 21. Where else the constitution and the provision in the constitution is that every county assembly should have 2 representatives, who is a man and a woman. So if we take 47 times 2, counties should have 47 times 2, that should be 94. So the other counties, which are 26, do not have a representative.
At all?
Not at all. So
What do you think the reason is on why that has not happened?
The usual politics of people swindling others, the usual politics of trying to look at the weakest and elbowing them out. There were a lot of court cases suing everybody around. But then again, it still goes back to the political representation, where leaders of political parties will say our bare minimum is actually this number of people. And actually, it would interest you to know that I'm one of the casualties where I was actually the nominee in Murang'a County Assembly. But maybe that's not where I want to head with this discussion. But I'm saying that for as long as...
No, we would like to hear.
For as long as people will constantly be edged out, the court fatigue and the political processes in Kenya, certainly we need a lot of goodwill from leaders of political parties. And we've seen leaders of political parties making things work. We've seen them deciding how my previous speaker in this hot seat was removed from a very prestigious position in the Senate. So if the political goodwill shows that a lot of changes can happen in 2 days, it means that political leadership can actually say that in my political party.
Right. So, Wanja, here we have an issue. I mean, from the first thing that you said, when we see representation of people living with disabilities in any of these fora, it is that it's almost to the level of tokenism, where they say, okay, let's involve you because, all right, we need to give you a chance. Or where there is representation, it's, handouts that are being given so that, you can. What needs to happen so that it moves from that level of us feeling sympathetic or leaders feeling sorry for and involving to the point whereby there is a seat at the table that is being involved in some serious agitation? What needs to happen to break that?
A lot needs to happen, and I would say some of these processes are actually very structural. It's not merely giving a person a seat at the table. It's actually meaningful participation, listening to their contributions. And let's go back to the topic of COVID-19, for instance. And I've noticed that most leaders in the counties and most leaders in the national government, there has always been assumption that they know what is good for people with disabilities. And that assumption is tragic because when you assume that you can fix these people, some of these solutions do not. Let me give you an example. And there's this government economic project, where they are saying that it's an economic stimulus package called Kazi Mtaani.
For the youth.
Yeah. But it is attached to the COVID because they are saying that the youth who have been affected. But the nature of this COVID-19 Kazi Mtaani project is very physically intensive. And I even saw one of the senior government person saying that we are looking at young people who are able-bodied, which in itself tells you that
it's biased.
It knocks some people out, right?
Certainly, it knocks on people out. And we're also saying that.
But they've also explained and said that this one is looking at this particular specific demographic. Other stimulus packages have looked at other demographics. For example, there's a stimulus package for persons living with disabilities and the elderly.
Well, then it really begs the question, is it that people with disabilities live outside of society that we have to do those packages, especially in some corner? For me, I think if we are to go to the question that she asked me, which was how do we ensure that there's representation in all spheres, it is actually saying that we want them everywhere. So if it's this Kazi Mtaani project, the question is, why would you think of in the conceptualization of that project, why would you think that there are no youth with disabilities who want to engage in the hygiene of their country? I would be interested. So when you say that your stimulus package is only based on the issue of giving you 2,000 shillings as a social protection, I think in itself is like you're assuming, stay in your corner, we shall just come and give you a small handout. What if I want to participate? And I'm not saying that is bad.
Can I ask you, don't you think that a certain element of affirmative action sometimes is necessary? If you are to actually bring this matter from the abysmal state it's at to where there's an element of a level playing field?
Certainly affirmative action is a very good idea, but affirmative action everywhere.
Affirmative action with consultation.
With consultation, certainly. Yes. Affirmative action that is based on not on the assumptions of. And it's all about, and in the previous discussion, there were issues to do a lot with misconceptions. There were issues a lot to do with assumptions. So why would you assume, for instance, that for as long as you are sorted in the social protection aspect, then that is enough? And speaking of that social protection, we also have questions. For instance, we saw that when the president talked about this COVID and there was some money that was released, that's when I saw chiefs and people doing that work, looking for information on people to benefit. Then the question is it that we've never gotten it right with our social protection, that it has to be in the midst of a pandemic? That's when you'll be looking for information and telling people to go to the chief. In any case, even that journey to the chief is a barrier to some people. Their people cannot leave their homes. And the other question is, the money for social protection was meant for with severe disabilities, which in itself is also very debatable. For instance, I have a disability. it's compared to who that mine will be severe vis-a-vis whose. So those are also questions, and that way we are saying to ensure that we are not all of us complaining in one corner with very little resources.
Wanja, socially speaking,
Yeah.
do you think Kenyans have actually gotten to a point where they are comfortable with disabilities of any nature?
Maybe when you say Kenyans, you'll be assuming that Kenyans are very
They're homogeneous.
They are homogeneous.
Actually, I'm doing this deliberately. Because socially speaking, you would be amazed that we're really not that different. The manifestations of the things that we hold dear may appear different, but our thinking structure is really not that different. And to ask the question, I'm even including people with disabilities, how they view themselves.
Well, I think I'll still pick it up from the point where Latif talks about the issue of homogeneous. And for me, I'll say this. Even myself, I think I'm privileged in a way because people are usually packed in many. It's a package. For instance,
segmented even within.
No, it's stereotyped.
No. Where
Layered.
Layered is the word actually. Where else I have a
Today we are
disability,
connecting, Wanja.
I have education, I have university education. That means that there could be a peer of mine who has a disability and is a young woman, but they do not have the privilege of education. So when you talk about Kenyans and if Kenyans are accepting of disabilities, maybe my peers would accept me, not necessarily because I'm too good, but because we are also connecting on the fact that both of us have had university education. So it begs the question, should we... And even then, who decides who should be accepted? I think we need to have standards. I think we need to have bare minimums and say
Actually,
that...
let me tell you why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
This discussion wouldn't be taking place if there wasn't already in existence a very negative bias against people who are presented as having disabilities. Am I right on that score?
You're right, you're very right.
Precisely. Now, this is something that not only has built over time, but has been carried forth over time. If a constitutional requirement, a basic, by law, 2 people with disabilities, 1 male, 1 female, should be in every county, is ignored.
It's ignored, and it also, even the very fact that we know the power that leaders of political party wield,
Yes.
and if they do not look at it as and Kenya as a society is very predatory in nature, and we've had all these very bad things. For instance, I remember when the COVID started, there was food meant to go to the people, and then suddenly half of it went missing. It was all over in the media. Then you're asking, you're stealing food of people who are starving. So the reason why some of us are afraid of some of these people, it's because we know that they can easily take even our own constitutional rights from, because if it's written in the constitution that 2 people should be in the constitutional assembly, and we are not in those assemblies, it means that there's someone who sat down, schemed and said, because I want to take a seat from someone, I'll steal from the weakest. And that's why we actually need a lot of protection. And that is why, for instance, going back to the debate on COVID, and why I was even talking about representation everywhere, we know that realities like education, people with disabilities have very minimal education. The statistics are actually damning. Daunting.
Yeah.
Imagine that according to UNDP, only 1% of women with disabilities in the South have had literacy, are literate, and the male are at 3%. So that feeds into the fact that not many people with disabilities are in formal, well-paying, well-protected jobs.
Yep.
So when you're talking about the effect of this COVID and the people in the informal sector, we know who is overrepresented there. And then we start issues like packages, and suddenly you are talking about people who are physically and agile and able to do.
People with disabilities are stigmatized, they're discriminated against. But I want to ask, socially, young people are often the focus of police brutality. How do people with disability fare?
Thank you very much for that question. And actually, I'll give you 2 instances when this COVID curfew situation started, where there was a man in Mumias, his name is Zakaria, who is deaf. So he was found, according to the media reports, he was found walking around at around 6:30, 6:40 p.m. He was actually really beaten by the by the police.
6:30, 6:40 p.m.
6:30, 6:40 p.m. It was in the media. And then there was a guy called Ramadhan Juma from Kakamega who was 35. It is interesting to know that he was also a victim of police brutality. And for us, that was a very huge issue of concern, because we are talking about inaccessibility of this COVID and precaution messaging, that a guy who is deaf maybe has no clue that he should be home towards 7 p.m. That was when the curfew was at actually 7 p.m. And it even builds into the question of how accessible is this media reporting and information to people who ordinarily wouldn't understand the standard information that is given. For instance, people are saying that wash your hands, maintain a social distancing. But a parent would be curious to know, this child of mine is dependent on me. So there's a lot of personal care and personal close relationship involved. And I actually raised it with my peers and I said, maybe we need to modify this information and say, if you have a person who cannot wash themselves, wash yourself first, wash them, and then wash yourself. Those are some of the inclusive messaging we are looking at. Because it is contradictory when you say, avoid this, yet there's a person who actually needs someone to guide them.
That's the only way.
Their hands, you know. And discrimination everywhere. And one would say, you guys like complaining a lot. No, it's not like our forte to complain from morning to evening. It's just that these issues are actually tiring. For instance, let me give you an example of a peer of mine in Kibra. There was a time that the NMS, I don't know who, is it Nairobi County Assembly or NMS, you know how we have this.
Now we don't know which is which.
Who is doing what?
Yeah, part of those two, whom I don't know, but they are NMS and county, they were giving water. You remember when they launched water bozers. So water goes to Kibra constituency. You know the dynamics of Kibra is a very informal kind of a settlement. So when it goes, maybe it stops here, people are coming with jerry cans to be given water. And it's water that is given for free. However, there is a person I know who has 3 children in Kibra, where else the water is given by the government for free, they have to pay someone to go and fetch for them water. And we're also asking, if we are talking about affirmative action, let us have it everywhere. For instance, I'd be curious to know, we have this Nyumba Kumi, the chief, the DCC. I wish they could map the disabled people in their localities and the wards, so that if they are giving water, they can say, to ensure that we are moving on well, let us have maybe the first 20 jerry cans
the fact of the
to
matter
these
is,
people.
the Nyumba Kumi and the chief already know the persons who are living with disability
They are aware.
in their region.
They do. No.
It's that thing of, just assuming. You assume that water has come, everybody come and get water and go. And this is where we take it back all the way to government and how government is thinking and how government is operating. Because just like you've said, what is so difficult in saying as NMS, we are going to distribute water to people in Kibra, and the first we know so-and-so requires water, just stay at home, we're going to bring you the water. Everybody else come. What is so difficult about that?
Maybe it could be that maybe the people at that top level, even if they have people who have disabilities or people who advise them, they are not able to contextualize inclusion at such a basic level as ensuring that water goes first. And we have seen best practices.
So how did you know the story of this particular person who in Kibra?
I know because I would say I'm a leader, and therefore some of these issues we've been raising. And they are best, even the issue of food actually. You remember there's a time in Kibra there was a stampede. People are saying, we've been told to go to collect food. Standing is a problem. Queuing is a problem. You know the nature of free things in Kenya where people grab each other.
Crowd now
so
even.
You are worried, do I go get food or do I go get injured in that fracas and dynamic? And we're also saying we need to see some orderliness and some sort of thoughtfulness in terms of these cautioning of wananchis. Because as much as we are all Kenyans, there are some Kenyans who are just disadvantaged. And those are some of the issues we are raising. And I would say this. I've seen that there are people who are actually embracing some of our feedback. Let me give, for instance, the National Youth Council. When we raised it with them, they actually had a special distribution of PPEs, they had a special distribution of sanitizers and everything, where they actually told us to map the people and actually give. So we are also saying that we've been saying these things, but we are also saying, is it that people are not listening, the people in positions of power?
It is because That is not their focus.
It is not their
It
priority.
is not their priority.
Unfortunately. Now, if we want to say going in, which is why I can understand the importance then of having representation at the county level, which is prescribed, right?
Yes.
So if you have that representation and people understand the importance of it, then perhaps you would see a different outcome or a different outcome from what we see today. So unless something is made a priority, unless it is right there at the very top of everything else that they need to, unfortunately, we're going to continue to see the results that we are seeing today, which again, it is quite unfortunate. However, what I wanted to ask you next then is looking at the agitation, because this is all of these are experiences that, we are aware that people who sit at the chief level, who sit at the Nyumba Kumi, for example, they are aware of these things. Are they made aware that you are also aware that they are supposed to be doing these things? Is it in their face in terms of, look, we know that this is supposed to be happening? Because it could be, all right, we know that they're supposed to be doing that, but we continue to keep quiet about it, so we just let things flow as normal.
On Twitter, I've been seeing people saying, normalize making noise. Normalize maybe putting your profile picture on what. Normalize. So I think the people in those decisions, and even this COVID, there is a lot of work that is falling squarely on provincial administration, chiefs, and people in that structure. And in any case, the chief is the representative. Ngaos. The chief is actually the representative of the president in my sub-location.
National Government Administrative Officers.
Okay.
Ngaos. So maybe one would ask, in the chief's baraza, do they have representation of a person with disabilities? And even if they have, do they listen to them? Because some of the challenges that some of our people face is actually that they feel sometimes they are not taken seriously.
Yes.
So even when you're having a point, one would wonder, you people require a lot. You put burdens.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
You see, this is not, don't wait for them to take you seriously. Make sure they take you seriously.
So you're saying there's fatigue as well. You fought this, you fought once, you fought twice, and you feel, really, I need to live my life as well.
Yeah, it's tiring, and that is...
Take a break. Take a
And
break.
come back.
Get your breath back. Look for allies.
Yeah.
And then come back. To understand this, look at the fight that women in this country have fought to have a voice. Just look at it. I'm not talking about any other country. This one here. That fight hasn't ended. They're still fighting. To the point where it's not the boy child who's disadvantaged. But they have fought. These things don't come to you easy. Because the resources you're talking about, you're fighting for the same resources as people who don't have your disability. Yes.
Let's take a break at 28 minutes to 10 o'clock. We want to look at what's happening on the roads, and then this conversation continues. We are speaking with Wanja Maina. She's a blogger and a disability rights activist.
All right, Langata Road heading towards the city centre, whether you choose to use Bagavi Way or then go towards the Nyayo Stadium roundabout, there's a bit of a traffic hold up there, but it shouldn't be too bad as you get to the roundabout at Timor, and as you then split, you should be fine going Bagavi Way and then joining with Valley Road or Ngong Road down the line. Other parts, still a bit of a hold up coming in from Thika Road, getting into the CBD, but it shouldn't be too bad from now, getting out of traffic hour in just a short while. It looks clogged, but you'll get out of it soon enough. Ngong Road is absolutely clear to and from the CBD all the way to Ngong Town. No traffic this morning, so that's great. Outer Ring is just starting to build up now for some reason. So if you're using that area, you need to know that there's a traffic hold up there. The eastern and southern bypasses have been holding up beautifully for the last couple of days, hoping it remains that way. So still stuck. It shouldn't take you too long to get out of it. In case you see something that we should know about, again, Spice FM, KE on Twitter.
As we continue the talk with the Wanja Maina and the disability rights activist, we'll be opening up the phone line so you can participate in this conversation as well shortly. we are looking at, what's happening to the persons living with disabilities in these COVID-19 times. You've just told us police brutality. Somebody who has hearing impairment, and then police would come and assume that this person is unanyata, kichwa ngumu, and you're beaten. And you just basically do not understand what's going on.
You can't even hear what the person is telling you.
Yeah, you can't even hear what the person is telling. Then we're talking about also provision of, basics like food and such, where somebody is still expected to come and struggle with everybody else on a queue with the able-bodied people. The Kazi Mtaani, you've raised an issue with it, and you're saying, so Kazi Mtaani is looking for able-bodied young men and women. What happens to the young men and women living with disabilities? Are we sure that they're getting, even if we're talking about that there is the fund for persons with disabilities, are we sure that they're covered? What if they want to contribute to
the hygiene of
their country and their community? What do they do? So there is all this conversation, even from the point of the composition of these bodies, composition of the Emergency Response Committee, composition of the task force, composition of the county committees that are dealing with COVID-19. If you do not have representation from persons with disabilities, how are you ever going to think about the persons with disabilities?
Right.
It goes into all those. I'm sure you have many other examples of what's happening now to persons with disabilities. Just paint the picture for us. Raise other aspects.
The other unique aspects that we are raising and we have issues with them is actually education. It's like this year is actually over in terms of the academic calendars, and our children will have to start again next year. For children with disabilities and people with disabilities, and as you heard, is actually it is education is golden. And when people are talking about my child will not be able to, they will repeat. For the realities on the ground is that for children with disability, education is actually protection.
Yep.
These children are face danger at home, in the estate, everywhere they're walking. So when they're in school, they might not have the ability, based on their unique challenges, to get an A, but they are protected from predators. We've had very sad cases. You've heard of them. The caregivers, sadly, who are usually mothers, I don't know where the fathers usually go after at some point. The caregivers need to take them to school for them to be cared there, for them to go and do some work.
Yep.
So here is a child who is actually at home up to next year. So it begs the question, first, this child has a unique education need. And this, the nature of it, if you look at this special education, it's a very repetitive, it's a routine. So I don't know, when we reset hours for next year in January, it's because we know that they left it at CBC class 4. So others, education means activities of daily living,
They'll basically be going back,
brushing their teeth. So the regression and uncertainty from ground zero. And teachers of special education have raised actually issues like, for instance, how sure are we? Where will we start with these children? Their curriculum is not as it's stipulated. Their curriculum is, were you able to put yellow and black in one box? That's progress for us. Are you able to brush yourself and move and maybe do as you are, based on their unique needs? So even as we are talking about education and as we are debating about the education calendar, I don't know if it's going to change from what we were told about January. We should also ask ourselves, you're saying that our children have laptops, they have access to the technology. Where we are working on the ground, not many people have that privilege of internet and ability to Zoom their education. Fine, you are saying that. But you're also saying, watch it on the TV, the people will be doing the education. But the question is, this is specialized, unique, individualized education. So are we actually saying that for the ministry and for the education, for us, a brilliant child is the one who is able to pass the exam and do the usual KCP and KCSE? So those are some of the issues. And I think maybe even someone like CS Magoha, who is passionate, and I've seen him make statements around learners with disabilities. These are actually debates, and maybe we can even ask, education for actually some of these children ties with issues like therapy, where you finish education, they go and fix your legs and so on. Other issues that we are seeing a lot is gender-based violence. As much as we are talking about people with disabilities, and we agreed with Siti Muga earlier that people are not homogeneous, we're also looking at the unique challenges that face women and girls. That violence could be, the gender-based violence as we know it, intimate partner violence. We also have violence from caregivers. Because these mothers are tired, they are fatigued, they have to take care.
Patience
Sometimes-
has run out.
The patience has really run out. So we are also asking, they're saying call 1195, call the government is going to do, it's like a number to call and report. But maybe assuming, and we can go further and further and ask, how accessible are our safe houses that meet women and girls who have been violated? Other issues that people with disabilities are worried about so much is that
Just take a pause on that because John is on the line. John calling in from Nyandarua. John, good morning.
Yes, good morning. How are you guys?
We're
Good
fine,
morning.
thank you.
Okay. Now, I'm happy that you have this lady in the studio today because you're doing a very nice job for the disabled people who have always been disadvantaged. Now, my concern has to do with this COVID issue regarding these people. There was a fund that was established by the government to assist these people during this COVID era. And as I had told you earlier, I have a daughter who is blind, who became blind as a result of meningitis. He has not received a single penny for the said COVID funds.
She has registered with
neighbor, I have a yeah, can I get?
Has she registered? Was there any form of registration required?
Exactly. The assistant chief asked for their name. We forwarded them twice indeed.
Okay.
And I have a neighbor whose child was born with a total disability. The parent, the child has also never received anything during this COVID era here in Nyandarua. So I'm wondering whether these funds were for Nairobi people and Nyandarua became an exceptional.
Good questions to ask.
Secondly, yes. Secondly, those right people for the disabled, like that lady, they should not just concentrate their affairs in Nairobi. They should be centralized and come to the rural areas. Have records for these people. It is important so that they may have the proper statistics of exactly how many of these people are, their problems, so that when they go to address their problems, they would be in a position to do exactly what is on the ground.
From a point of information.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much, John.
Then there was another issue that you discussed with Kenyans. It was very important. That bill might catch some communities by surprise. He said that it's receiving public participation, but the public participation is taking place in Nairobi. There are communities who cannot digest the content of the bill, and they should not be caught by surprise. So it is important that this public participation on that bill be distributed to all communities in the country, because they should be participants of that bill also.
All over the country.
Specifically the elite in Nairobi.
Thank you. Thank you, John. I think that question goes into how Parliament itself has structures for public participation and what that means. Thank you very much, John, and have a good day. This is a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We are talking to Wanja Maina. So you've heard what issues he's raising.
Yeah, I've had John's issues that he's raising, and it's building up to harmonization. I've had issues that John from Nyandarua is raising. Nyandarua must be very cold, actually. That's why I went to school. But anyhow, he has talked about data and information. And for me, I think that there's a very big gap. I don't even know if it's a gap or a pothole about data. But it's actually data, but not merely data. Don't say that we have 900. The census people said we have 900,000 people with disabilities in Kenya. Fine, that is just a number. But for that to make sense, for me, I'm looking at what is the distribution in counties? What is the disaggregation in terms of female, male?
That's there.
Well, I didn't see it from the census, but even if it's there, then how that data ties to the people who are doing social protection, because he says that he's registered, but he has not received. Yep. Maybe that could be the story of another John in
several other people.
It's the story of Johns across the country, and the question that we have asked this in this show many times.
Yeah.
Why, after August, why do we have to ask chiefs to go and register again?
And
I mean,
you remember also how that ties to the Huduma number situation,
they should
where we
just be
also give
adding new
information.
information. If there's anybody who was born now between August last year and March this year who has physical or any other form of disability, then add onto the database. But the government should already have that database.
Yeah, they should already
John's
have
daughter
it.
should be on the database.
Should be on the database, and they said that is the story of many Johns. So information, data, information, and making sense of that.
So
those
the challenge
numbers.
that he was throwing at you is you activists,
Yeah.
because you have come out and you've said, I mean, I'm going to advocate the rights of persons with disabilities. You should do that and go and collect data. Go to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics and say, I'd like to see this breakdown. Challenge them and say, because they already have that breakdown. So what is this? What is the distribution of the persons with disabilities? What disability?
Speaking of Nyandarua, actually, there's no representative in the county assembly of a person with a disability. So that's where maybe the problem starts as we go about activists doing
Everything
that.
else.
But then again, also the work of activists, and maybe to what extent it becomes now a responsibility of government. For example, if it's an issue of data and they are the ones who collected, then surely,
Yes,
for
it
us,
is-
it's
it is
just
their
working with the
responsibility.
numbers.
It's just like what CT was telling you earlier. I mean, so for you to be able to challenge the government, to challenge the people who are in authority, you've got to go to them and tell them, this is what is. This is the information on the ground, and this is what you're doing on the ground. And there's a clear disparity. Otherwise, they keep giving you those answers. We have a fund for persons with disability.
Yes, and people are receiving money on a
People are
weekly
receiving
basis,
money.
for example.
In fact, I can show you a database here. Just look. And they'll open for you a laptop and show you these people have received money today. Now, if you don't have the number of how many should have received money today, you cannot counter that.
Are we looking at issues now, Wanja, that have cropped up because of the COVID situation, or are we looking at inherent issues that existed even before COVID came about?
COVID has exposed us. It has exposed our health systems and how weak they are. It has exposed how, for instance, education and the inequalities among our children. So these inequalities have actually, people with disabilities are the largest minority in Kenya. So, like, put together, you are the majority of the minority. I know it sounds like a tongue twister, but the majority of the minority.
Yep.
So these issues of inequalities have always been there. The journeys, it's like inequality starts really, for example, when you're not given education. We've talked about the statistics of 1% from the UN. So it means you've started being lagging behind the others, that you shall not transition to higher secondary education, shall not transition to institutions of higher learning, and how that also means that generally you cannot get a better job, you cannot get skilled work, and so on. So inequalities have always been there, but certainly this pandemic has brought now another inequality that is, it's like overturning the new normal, and it has also presented for us an opportunity to also ask our questions. What will we do when we are all caught up in these situations and we are not able, who are our people that need an extra help and an extra push? Speaking of inequalities and our health systems, and that's an issue that we've been seeing, for example, in the US and so on. Some of the people with disabilities, we know that there are people who have underlying health conditions. And I remember a peer of mine actually told me that the peer of mine has a disability that is degenerative and so on. They feel that, as we have seen in the West, where this condition is getting too much, our health systems are pressured, maybe we might get to a point where many people are so sick that some people will be deprioritized and say, this one, her chances of survival are minimal compared to others. So it even gets the question of maybe the right to life, or is it the right to death? The right to life, and who will decide whose life is of more value
important than
vis-a-vis the other. And it will so we the health systems, the accessibility of those quarantine places. For instance, those quarantine beds, I don't know if people are quarantined in the bed or in a dormitory. Maybe the height,
double-deckers and all.
The double-deckers and those situations. And at what point will we also have our health professionals understanding that people with disabilities are also susceptible? Because I've noticed that when we started this COVID discussion, people with disabilities were more worried about the socio-economic impact of the COVID, which is understandable. But let us look at the direct health impact of this COVID. Getting COVID-19 and being unwell, going to a place where there's so much pressure in the isolation or in the hospitals that people decide you can live longer, so we give you the ventilator vis-a-vis the other.
Vis-a-vis the other
So who
person.
will protect people with
person with
disabilities,
disability.
even from the bias of the health professionals?
We'll shortly be concluding our conversation today with Wanja Maina. She's a blogger and a disability rights advocate. But we want to hear what you have to say about this. 0719-012-600. Ruben Kigame in Eldoret. Good morning.
Good morning, Eric. How are you?
Well, thank you. How are you doing in Eldoret? Baridi?
Yeah. I think we were at about 12 degrees last night.
Hey.
Very, very cold. Well, good conversation you're having there.
Thank you.
I wanted to link what Wanja, very good job she's doing with advocacy, with a bit of what Susan Kihika was talking about. The clause that she indicated would be expunged if possible. And she categorically denied any kind of sponsorship or association with groups that are interested in this whole bill. History tells me that International Planned Parenthood Federation, started by Margaret Sanger, was also very interested in eugenics. In fact, some of her writings portray the conversation as involving the weeding, the getting rid of the weeds in America and leaving a pure breed. And escalate that to Hitler or whoever it is that would have, gained from that kind of rhetoric. I think there is an unspoken concern that I think needs to come to the table, and that is the link between all of that and some of what Wanja is saying. Once the bill, becomes law, we certainly have a concern about possible eugenic type conversations.
Okay, but that particular clause is being deleted from the bill.
Is it a fact?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So let's come to COVID-19. And, I raised this back in March. I write a little bit in social media. I raised the question, how much conversation, how much funding is actually being put to take care of some of what Wanja is talking about.
Right.
But beyond the funds, because you can't just throw money at problems, I think my point is we have inherited a problem. The situation with disability is not new. The problems we are dealing with are not new. It's just that now they have been escalated by the circumstances that we have with COVID-19. And so what we need right now is maybe a lot more action on the part of the government, and not so much policy, because we have enough policy.
If I may just ask,
Yes, it is.
from your reading, I'm sure you encountered the idea that what we know of as eugenics, which was made extremely unpopular by Adolf Hitler, had some
Popular
form of
or unpopular?
unpopular.
Okay.
Unpopular, because you see, the thinking behind eugenics was to try to breed out ailments that at that particular time people felt or believed were hereditary. Okay? And it's this eugenics that we now refer to in this modern day and age as genetic engineering.
Yeah.
And it's gaining momentum. The thinking behind it, if you take it in its purest form, was never actually negative. But the practice of it turned out to be otherwise. Would you say that my statement is well balanced?
No, it's not, because you're only looking at the technical or the medical side of things. You're not looking at the social.
What's the social
Yeah.
side of things?
The social side of things is that once you grant a technical provision, someone is bound to abuse it. GPS was supposed to help us,
Navigate better.
navigate better, but now it helps us with drones.
And
So
missiles.
we shouldn't make any progress because people might turn it on its head.
when the danger is directly, affecting people's lives, City.
Yeah. No. So, with the city's concern, my bigger concern would actually be with vaccinations, and not even so much the policy,
Okay.
because we all know, for example, vaccines have mercury and all these. So, look at the HPV, vaccine.
I think
for example.
you're veering, Ruben. You're veering into another conversation that
Okay.
we will have another day. Thank you very much.
It's
City who led you there. Okay. Let's thank you very much for that conversation, for your contribution this morning.
Thank you.
Asante sana. So as we come to conclude the show, what is it that you'd like to see done? We are still fighting COVID-19.
Our big issue is that there are short-term interventions, the usual provision of PPEs, access of the basic hygiene products, ensuring that the ngaos, as you call them, and the people in that provincial administration are actually making sure that people are catered for. If there are people I want to appreciate in absentia, because they're not here, but it's the community health workers. I've noticed that they are making efforts. They are trying to do community health workers. Actually, I would like to say they are like the backbone of our health. They are always willing to learn. They've been asking us, how do we deal with these people? Number two is that I would like also to say that I've seen the Ministry of Health. Our recommendation was to have sign language interpreters, and they embraced it. Nowadays, when the CS is doing the normally and abnormally updates, he's actually having those people. So our recommendations or issues that we think will make this situation better is harmonization of data. Someone should be very disappointed to know that John in Nyandarua with a child, and he also talked about a child of a friend, is missing out from the right as per the government and many other people. So the people with that data, and it's in your laptops, harmonize it, put it together, and then use it for decision making.
Right.
Number two, medias are always our allies. They are very good people. In fact, I'm in a media station here. But we're also encouraging the media to also try and have a very balanced narrative, because some of these stories are actually contributing to stigmatization. Like one of the media houses, whom I won't name, actually did a story, but they projected people as beggars, and we raised a bit of concern. So when we do a media interview that is balanced, it is contributing to change perceptions in society. It is also contributing to inform the people in decision making.
Yeah.
So that is one of the things. And number three, the people with disabilities and the leaders and the organizations on the ground, to let the people in administration know that they are not merely bystanders. I've seen a lot of efforts. I've seen a lot of organizing, which is something that should be commended. For instance, there's an NGO called Nondo in northern Kenya. They have been doing a lot of organizing around pastoral people and the nature of the pastoral people and how communal they are. And that is one of the things we could embrace. So to the people who hold resources and to the people who hold decision making, we tell them we are here and we have opinions, but try and embrace our contributions and
Right.
do not talk down on us.
One final one, yes.
One final one is actually issues to do with inclusive education, inclusive communication, because this COVID is evolving a lot. The other time we were worried about, passing it to people. Now it's like a communal issues to do with the curfews. So we say those people who are formulating this communication, make sure that it's inclusive. It is speaking to people who might not understand it as it were. And just a polite reminder, and earlier we were told a proverb by C.T. Muga where he said that the stream and the river, I don't know what he said. And I will say this, in that same Nigerian, the Yorubas are the ones who are famous for these quotes, proverbs. They say that you cannot shave a man in his absence, like his beard in his absence. So we call upon people who are in tables of decision making.